everyone's working on their healing journey. Everyone's unpacking stuff. Everyone has stuff in their life. And I really feel this kind of work can couple with any kind of self-care rituals, any kind of therapy rituals, any kind of self-work you're doing. You can build a very personal spell around it.
Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality. If you're new here, my name is Kat, and I'm a longtime astral traveler and spirit consultant. I am joined today by my return guest and good friend and colleague, Jodi Anne. Welcome, Jodi Anne, back to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Kat?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy that you agreed to come back and chat with me. I was out shopping around and feeling the aesthetic. It is all of the Halloween stuff is out, and I love that all my witchy stuff, my tarot stuff, all of that stuff. It's like my aesthetic is everywhere right now. But I also got the hit and the feeling that's like, well, why is my aesthetic only for Halloween? Why is it still such a costume? And
Mm.
I was like, I would love to do a show talking about witchcraft, talking about dispelling some of the misconceptions surrounding witchcraft. And I was like, the person to talk about that is definitely Jodi Anne, the outest and loudest and proudest witch I know. So thank you for being here.
I love it. I love wearing that beautiful crown or pointed hat, I guess, of the
Well, there's
oldest and loudest.
I think it's beautiful to own who you are and celebrate who you are and celebrate your traditions out loud and proud, right?
Mhm.
There's nothing to hide from, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. Can you just briefly let people know your background in witchcraft, just introduce people to it?
Yeah, so I am a self-proclaimed witch, and I actually decided to come all the way out of the broom closet and just wear the label. I'd been practicing Wicca and then British traditional witchcraft, Celtic recreationist witchcraft, and then more kind of, and I'll get into what this all means,
Yeah,
eclectic
yeah.
and um, elemental witchcraft is what I really like, which is very much having a spiritual practice around the seasons and the ebb and flow that we experience in nature and in our lives. And I decided to come out and just wear the label because I feel like it's a way of taking back the power. I feel like by using a word that has connotations of scary, powerful women, you can actually reclaim it and be a very empowered, ferocious force of nature. And I do think
Absolutely.
that when we look at some of the practices of Indigenous people in all kinds of places, whether it's here in North America, Indigenous people, or in like West Africa, or if you go into the Mayan traditions, or if you look at the First Nations people in, what's the one right beside, oh, Australia, sorry.
Hmm.
There's so many similarities. So for me, it's really getting back to the roots of spirituality, the idea that we can learn from nature, from our ancestors, from gods and goddesses, different deities, all about how to live in flow and how to honor ourselves.
Do you find that a lot of the original like indigenous European or Northern European practices follow a lot of the same sorts of lines as some of the other indigenous practices that you were mentioning?
Yeah, it's really kind of amazing. Like when you sit down and start doing the scholarly work, and I haven't done a lot of the research myself, but I've sat with elders, and basically every single Indigenous belief system has ancestor worship attached to it, so that your grandmothers, your grandfathers, the souls of those who came before you are invested in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you call to them, they come and answer. So whether
Yeah.
it's like even Roman people or Egyptian people, or all the way to our First Nations here, they all have these traditions. There's traditions of if you want to speak to the animal world, you usually go on a spirit journey or an astral travel, as you would call it,
Hmm.
and you go into like a crevice, like under a rock or in the nook of a tree, and you go kind of into the earth. And if you
Hmm.
want to reach the dearly departed, you go under. And if you want to reach angels and ascended masters, you go up. And there's no way that the Mayan people could have talked to the First Nations people in Africa. We didn't have boats then. And when you
Hmm.
do the anthropology work, they all have these same themes. So there must be truth to it. And I'm getting like the psychic girl's getting goosebumps as I talk to you.
Yeah, yeah, because, and I was just feeling like I feel like there is a modern resurgence of that, of people who connect to source energy are kind of naturally rediscovering that a lot of those things are fundamentally true, that the souls of the departed or the spirits of the departed are with us when we call out to them, that angels and guides are reachable, that our past generations matter and care and involved in everything that we're doing, that there's a lot of love and support, and being grounded and reconnected to nature, it feels empowering and solid and validating to be embraced in all that is,
Mhm.
as siblings in creation. and and I feel like there's a big return to a lot of those knowings that are just coming as downloads for people who are doing this kind of work. And it's an interesting dive in to see how much of that really was original practices. Like, it's those who came before us were doing a lot of those same things.
And there's other ceremonies that are similar, like burning ceremonies. So for
Mhm.
myself in 2024, is that what year we're in? Yes, we're in 2024. I'm not always going to be able to have a roaring bonfire at the turn of a season, but I
Yeah.
can do things in my home. I can adapt these traditional things into my little modern world. So that
Hmm.
might be, during solstice. Well, one of my favorite, actually, my favorite adaptation is during May Bon or Beltane. Instead of having a roaring fire, I can't do that. We often have a fire ban. So I take candles and I put them in a fire safe dish, like a big cast iron dish on my floor. So I'll take like 3 or 4 little tiny tea lights and I'll put them in a fire safe and I will jump over that. So instead of leaping across a fire or instead of having a big fire ceremony, me and my little coven will gather in someone's house. We will make sure we're not wearing any flowy dresses so we don't catch ourselves on fire. And we just leap over a few candles. And the idea was it's the welcoming of the sun, right?
Hmm.
It's the May season, so you've got that fire and you're leaping into the new and you're burning away anything that's attaching you to the past. So it's like a freshness, a starting new. And then they would take the May Bon fire ashes and they would put that in the fields.
Yeah.
And that's a
And I
Celtic tradition. So you look at some of the wisdom there, like we know potash is great for growing things, right? And then you have this whole ritual that as you're starting your planting season, when you're going to be growing things, you're doing a ritual for your soul. So whatever you're planting in your soul, you're also doing like the work on multiple layers. So a lot of the way that a lot of new age witches practice is we take these concepts that would be used to tend the soil, and a lot of us tend our souls with them.
I love that. And I think that's actually like a great foundation for a channel or a segment on a channel, is just how to practice some of these practices in a modern context. Like, here's what I do to take these traditions and turn them into a modern context where it's safe and legal to still practice them.
Right.
And I think it's important to talk about like the meaning and the tradition and the energy around rituals, because I think that there's, for some people out there, there is a lot of fear and confusion around magic, or doing some of those kinds of things that for a long time got turned into something sinister or evil or something. And performing rituals is like this beautiful way to take the physical and connect it to the energy and the spiritual by performing something that the intent is to ground it into physical reality in a way, talking about like what magic really is a little bit, can be helpful.
So what I can tell you first off is when we are using magic, one of the things is like manifestation's a hot word right now,
Hmm.
right? And it works. Spell work is very similar to manifestation. You're just layering more. Like at its base, you're layering more things. So where manifestation is your thought work and you're really concentrating and you're building that energy. Now imagine if let's say for something like everybody loves abundance, right? Like let's just do general abundance. So for abundance, you could get a green candle and you can then anoint that candle with a beautiful smelling spell oil that makes you just think of the sweetness of life. And then next to that, you can put some things that represent the sweetness of life. So maybe you're going to put some almonds and some honey. Maybe you're going to put bumble jasper. You could get that because bees are associated with abundance. Honey is associated with sweetness. You could gather all those things together. And then on a little piece of paper, you could write, I'm welcoming abundance and sweetness into my life. And you put that under the candle and you would just burn that candle. So you're layering multiple things that are associated in our collective conscience with
Mhm.
richness and abundance. And that's just all off the top of my head. Like
Yeah.
anyone listening, you can get on the internet and you can like correspondences to abundance, colors that correspond to confidence, or because I like to do magic that will complement some of the things I want to change for myself, right? Everyone's working on their healing journey. Everyone's unpacking stuff. Everyone has stuff in their life. And I really feel this kind of work can couple with any kind of self care rituals, any kind of therapy rituals, any kind of self work you're doing. You can build a very personal spell around it. And then every
Yeah.
time you see that on your altar, you're reminding yourself of your worth, of the work you're doing, of all the things that you are working on. And that builds that energy and just superpowers that manifestation.
I confess completely, I've never actually studied with anybody, but I don't know, I feel called sometimes to just do things, perform certain rituals, but I'm kind of like, I'll use things like that have maybe not traditional meanings, but personal associations to me. The feeling of like comfort or stability if I'm working on my grounding or whatever is like, I will use like a sheet of fabric softener because that smell of
Mm,
fresh laundry,
mhm.
like to
No,
me
I
there's
love
an
it.
association, an energy association with that smell of warm, fresh, snuggle, soft laundry just really evokes that feeling for me. So it's not necessarily a traditional element, but it's like what gets my energy going.
And that's going to work in spell work you do. And that's why I encourage
Yeah.
people to go deep and like think about it. Like, what are you trying to manifest? What are your connections? And if you can't, if you don't know, then get in the Google machine. Because
Yeah.
if you don't know or if you're struggling to find a connection, we can rely on countless years of connotation, right? Like
Yeah.
water is usually associated with motherhood, birth, healing the subconscious. So we can always use water in any rituals to do with that. Actually, specific to Halloween, or in the Celtic witchcraft world, we call it Samhain. And
Hmm.
it is spelt Samhain, and lots of people pronounce it incorrectly, but it's pronounced in the Gaelic as Samhain. We're actually heading into the Witch's New Year. So, in the Celtic circle and in the British traditional and Wiccan circles, it's the end of the growing season and the end of the gathering season that is the end of the year as we prepare to go into the dark season, which is winter. So, it's a really good time to take stock of what have you gathered this year? What have you accomplished this year? What do you want to let go of before we go into the darkness? What do you not want to take with you into the incubation period of winter? So it's a really, really powerful time. And when we look outside our window, everything is letting go. The
Yeah.
leaves are falling, the trees are dying, the shrubs are dying. So we can harness that collective energy and kind of ride it.
Yeah, there's an element of like things that fundamentally make sense to go with what is naturally happening with the world and in the environment, and roll with that energy with what you're doing. It makes a lot of sense to be living in connection with that.
And if your life is calling you to, you can do release work anytime.
Yeah.
Like maybe you just had like, maybe you just broke up in a relationship and you need to like do some cleansing work in the middle of summer. That's okay. It's just when the earth is in that energy already, you can kind of harness it.
Now I have to bring it up and talk about it a little bit, and I do sometimes still see stuff like this out there working like with dark arts or
Mhm,
dark energies. And I'm hoping that you can speak on that a little bit or clear up any misunderstandings
mhm.
about that.
First off, there's what we call the threefold law.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you do, it's like karma, it's going to come back to you, and usually threefold. And within that, some people do practice what we would call baneful magic.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the new age term for it, but it's hexing and
Mm-hmm.
it works. So first I'm going to talk about some ways it can be great. In my own life, I have occasionally used baneful magic in the same way that I would excommunicate someone from my life who doesn't follow boundaries. So I don't attack with magic, but I will use everything in my disposal to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had toxic coworkers who have worked to get me reprimanded, who already you've said you've gone through all the things, you have boundaries with them, you use I me language, you try your best. And there are ways that people use to bind that person's energy to them. So what if you're using baneful magic well, you can take someone who takes their anger and their hatred and their basic inability to cope as an adult and sprays it all over your office.
Mm-hmm.
You can use magic to bind their energy to them. Then they have to deal with their own anger. They have to deal with their own toxicity without pushing it on every passive person in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's how I use baneful magic. Other people do other things. Other people get mad at other people and lash out at them.
Yeah.
So, like anything, you can use it negatively.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's an important distinction, in any practice, in any thought process, in any religion, in
Mhm.
any political structure, there are people who use something or twist something or make it into something harmful.
Mhm.
Um, there just really isn't any way to control all of humanity. Like
Yeah.
people are all on their own path and their own journey, and some people that's the phase, the part that their soul is in right now, right?
Mhm.
And it's my personal belief that everybody's lived lifetimes where that's where their soul was. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's to my broader sense or my broader viewpoint, there's no sense in like fearing or being angry at where somebody else is, because probably your
Mhm.
soul was there at one point too, and it's
Yeah.
it's a part of the growth process. There isn't any reason to not allow people their own path or their own
Mhm.
thought processes. So, however, people are using their practices, whether those are witchcraft practices or other religious practices, is there's no reason to be angry or fearful of things.
Well, and what's interesting is a lot of times I've had many people ask me to perform love spells for them
Mm-hmm.
because they do work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that falls in baneful magic because you're binding someone without their permission to another person,
Yeah.
right? So all those kind of binding and tying spells are I would find something more dark magic if you're doing a love spell to tie someone to you. And I think actually in those spells you're always creating an unbalanced relationship because the unwilling person who the love spell is on is always going to struggle against that tether because it wasn't by their own will.
Right. And I think that ultimately that's not what you're wanting. Like, I
No.
don't think in love, that's what people don't want, to be tied to a person who doesn't actually reciprocate or want that energy. Like that's not actually the heart of what it is you want. Um,
But you'd be surprised how many people, once they find out you perform witchcraft, ask you, oh, do you do love spells? As if it's
yeah,
this beautiful thing just because it has the word love attached.
that's wild, and I don't think that's love.
No, me
I
neither.
think it I think it's I think it's something closer to obsession and self-gratification than it is
Mhm.
love. How much can you really love somebody that you didn't want them to be free and choose you? Like, I don't know, that in my head that doesn't equate very well. How do you, this is an interesting question, like how would you compare that to say a manifestation practice? Because a lot of people would also try to manifest a certain person into their life or try to attract
Mhm.
somebody into their life. Do you think that has a kind of a different energy?
Yes. And I've mentored people and counseled people on this, where instead of doing a love spell to bind someone to you, you do a self-love spell where you look at what is your relationship to love? What is your relationship to your own worthiness? How are you treating yourself?
Yeah.
Because you're always going to end up in a relationship at the same vibration that you're at. So
Yeah.
if you're reaching and grasping for someone to complete you, you're going to be manifesting, because we're always co-creating with the universe, right? I believe spell work is co-creating with consciousness. So if you're in that dynamic where you want love so bad, then look at, how do you love yourself? How do
Yeah.
you resonate with the vibration of love?
Very powerful uh realization, I think, for a lot of people. Like, if you take the time to write down all the things it is you want in a partner, all the things you like,
Mm-hmm.
I want adventurous, I want somebody who's interesting, I want somebody who's a passionate lover, I want, if you write all that down and then you look at it on the paper, you realize that what you've written down is who you are, or what you want to
Yeah.
be, who you are in your mind.
Yes.
Like, what you actually want is to be the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can embrace that energy, like, wow, this on the paper, this is the person I really am on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have places where you haven't allowed yourself to become that person, that's
Mm-hmm.
where the work, that kind of work really starts, is realizing what you're trying to attract is really the best version of yourself. What you want to be, who you really are, spiritually, is all on that paper. And so
That is
that's really the place to start. You know what I mean?
That is really beautiful wisdom. I love that. I
Uh,
really love that. And I would, and I've seen too, people who do embody that know what they want, but then they're blocking being able to receive that.
mhm.
So there's spell work you can do on that. Like, what is my relationship with receptivity, right? How can I embody the energy of being able to receive? And people who are socialized as women have a hard time in our culture with receiving. We're often culturalized to give. So there's a lot that you can do on healing work. I think a lot of times when we dive into to finding partners in love, we end up going down that path of healing. Like, what is the shadow belief behind the inability to receive?
Yeah, and it kind of that little exercise of writing it out, it really helps to like illustrate for you, like, if you've written down, oh, I want somebody who's adventurous, and you know, is it because you want more adventure in your life? Like, you're trying to attract somebody that's filling in a space that is actually something you just want for yourself. So it
Mm-hmm.
means that you have an adventurous spirit, but there's something that's blocking, some fear, something that holds you back in that area that doesn't let you just become that vibration. And you will attract somebody who has that quality once you embody the vibration of it yourself. So looking at that and realizing that the things that we're hoping to attract in other people, I mean, some people want a strong partner, you know what I mean? Somebody who protects me and I feel safe, but that's, you want to feel safe. So what
Mm-hmm.
is it that's holding you back from feeling safe in yourself? There's a lot that can be gleaned about self-love and self-healing from taking a moment to realize that, you know, what you're hoping to attract in a partner is really the things that you're hoping to complete about yourself. You can learn a lot from that rather than, like, again, I would absolutely, I'm with you, like, just trying to bind a specific person to yourself, an invasion of free will,
Mm-hmm.
which is, that's not cool. And not only that, but a lot of times you may not actually know who that person is spiritually on the inside, or what things they're going through. Like, that may not even be what's best. What are some other things that people like typically are like asking for, or
Hmm.
what do you see a
I
lot?
I do a
Now
lot
I'm
of work.
curious.
My favorite work is it's termed, it's kind of like curse removal, but it was taught to me as negative thought form unraveling. So you work with someone on some of their deeper wounds, and sometimes they can't see them clearly because there's layers of protection, right? It's doing shadow work for them, with them. So you spend time with them, you get to know them, and you'll see it in their organic language. Little things will pop up. So when I was learning this work, we do it on each other in the circles I was in under the mentor who was training me. And one of the beliefs I had was that women always got the short end of the stick.
Hmm.
Like, we always had it worse. And it caused a lot of resentment. And I would see things through the veil of that all the time. So it caused resentments in my relationships. It was a burden I was carrying. My mentor had one of the students do the work to unravel that. So she went through and searched in my energy field and in my ancestral line and found the inception of that belief system. And it went back many, many generations. And so she did the spell work and the energy work to remove that, to free that ancestor, untying the ancestral line. It's unraveling, because I mean, we can do thought work and we can do all kinds of emotional work, but when you start working on the shadows and you start working on a spiritual level and an ancestral level and a karmatic level with these same things, it just breaks things open in a whole new way. I feel like it complements any other therapy, that any other system that people are using.
Thank you so much, always, as always, Jodi Anne, for joining me. We have the most amazing conversations. I really love connecting with you, and I appreciate so much your time and your practices and sharing your wisdom with us. Do you want to let the people know where they can find you out there in the wide world?
For sure. So I have a little podcast called The Witching Half Hour or so. Kat's been on it. We've had some fun over there. It's on all your streaming channels. There is a YouTube channel as well that you can find if you Google The Witching Half Hour or so. And if you're interested in a reading or any of my services, you can find that out at Jodi Anne, psychicmedium.com.
Awesome. And I will put all of those links in the description so they're easy for people to find. Once again, thank you so much, sis. Always fun to connect with you and have that energy. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and joining in the conversation. Like, subscribe, drop us a comment, all of that fun stuff. And we will see you next time on Spirituality.